Good morning and hello everyone. It is very rare for me to stress before I start speaking. With Amos Gilad there is a schedule to abide by. I was given 15 minutes and I can never just speak for 15 minutes. So I was given 2 more minutes, just extra time. So altogether, let's go through a quick journey around this thesis that I would like to present to you. We are facing the danger of a dictatorship, of a non-democratic regime. We've talked about this. We are going toward a halachic country, a halachic state. And I would like to take you on a short journey in this area of the growth of Zionism. In the 18th century, at the end of the 18th century, there was the French Revolution, the era of enlightenment, a liberal world, a world that talks about equality between citizens, about liberty, freedom from religion, feudal systems, and all of these things appear at that time. At the same time, there's emancipation, and the emancipation is basically recognizing the fact that Jews can go into the establishment, can be equal citizens with equal rights in different societies. And immediately it begins in 1891 in the discussion about Jews in France, and it was said by someone who's very well known, Clément Toumet, that Jews are being accepted as individuals but not as a group, as a nation. And what happened is that following this openness that happens, it began a little bit in the United States with the First Amendment, and it's also taking place in other countries around Europe. And many Jews leave, get out of their ghettos, and begin to get into the national infrastructures, the national organizations that were opened up to them. And this entrance into the establishment came with great momentum. It really changes the state of affairs, the state of the Jews in Europe. The great concern, as indeed took place, that Jews, in terms of the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox world, will leave religion once they come out of the ghettos, and some actually go to different countries altogether. Some join national groups. One group talked about other issues, and at the same time, there was a group that said, we are staying within this new framework that was formed, and we are Jews. That is the main point, and that is what I wanted to clarify. Now, what happened was that the response of the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi, is very clear. The Khatam Sofer says there's nothing new that was not written in the Torah. The ultra-Orthodox world was formed in a certain way. Now, those that emerged from this framework came and said, okay, there can be Jews, we can be Jews, but we don't have to listen to everything the rabbis say. So those who engaged in this are two people that I want to make note of here. Of course, Pinsker, who I will talk about in a moment, and Achad Ha'am. And what happened is that the main thesis that is now going to accompany us throughout this presentation is that there is a reason to distinguish between the state and religion. Because at the time in Israel, in the Bible times, religion was something people counted, but at the same time there was a national prospect, there was a national perception. We are religious Jews, and the religion is one thing. We are national Jews, and you can be religious at the same time, but you can also be a national Jew that is not religious, that does not abide by the rabbinical decrees, but you do believe in the religion, believe in the history, in the culture, in the tradition. This is the distinction, and this is a dramatic distinction that took place following the emancipation. Now, what they have analyzed and explained is that religion, as it developed, created a situation where it includes nationalism, but there's also the religionization of the national situation. We can give many examples. The Hebrew language, for instance, which was a daily language in biblical times, becomes a holy language that is only reserved for rituals and prayers and so on. At the same time, there was also the very famous story of Hanukkah, where in order for the religious decree, we talk about the oil that was only supposed to last for 1 day but lasted 8 days. Apparently this whole story was made up in Babylonia 600 years after the actual events took place, and there are endless examples of religionizing nationalism. Now these people said, and the thesis that existed in the Jewish people for a very long time was expressed and manifest by Saadia Gaon, who said, our nation is only a nation by its Torah, by its holy scriptures, which means it's all inclusive. And so the national aspect became ideal rather than reality, and this is happening. And this is what this group that was being formed goes against this. Now, what happened at that time is that the Jews go into the establishment, the national institutions of their countries, and they go into banking, they go into the stock exchange, they go into law and medicine and big international businesses, international commerce and trade, which leads to phenomena. First of all, it begins with Jews that combine their heritage and their culture with the openness brought on by the French Revolution, and towards the middle of the 19th century, a wave of anti-Semitism begins. The Jews become too successful every time there is a big financial problem, like in France in 1870, after the French are defeated by the Prussians. There is an economic crisis, and the Jews are immediately blamed for all the financial problems, and that happens again with the crisis of the collapse of the French initiative with the Panama Channel. A lot was invested in that, and that happened towards the end of the century, and again there is great anti-Semitism surrounding that. And because of this fascinating situation that on the one hand the Jews maintain their religion, remain religious without being held hostage by the rabbis and their decrees, and they distinguish between the state and their religion, and they are very impacted by the emancipation. On the other hand, at the same time, they understand and they realize, as Herzl did at the time, that this is not for them. This is not for them. There is anti-Semitism. Jews cannot be here. And then happens the very famous part, or very well-known part, of this one main person that we have forgotten about a little bit, which is Pinsker. And he said the Jewish people are like a ghost. They don't have a territory, they don't have an identity, and even when they are no longer alive, they remain as a ghost among the living. The Jewish state and its destruction has impacted political thought, but the loss of spiritualism that followed it has created greater danger. During persecution, the Jews were not able to renew their nationalism, and they wanted sovereignty and liberty, but they do no longer. And what is this group saying? It is high time that we renew this movement, and we have no chance of doing that unless we go back to wanting to be nationalist. And what also brings this and accentuates this is the 1880 and 1881 riots, and also 1884 Katowice committee that Pinsker heads, and is being joined by even some rabbis that participated in this convention, and a new perception comes out, which means there's no hope for the Jewish people except returning to the land of Israel. And this mission should be taken up by all Jews, religious and non-religious, and this is what must happen. And this is how Zionism begins, how they start to work in various countries, to fundraise, to contact Rothschild, who starts his investments in the land of Israel, and the new reality is created into that. In 1891, Pinsker passes away, and he was really the main spirit behind this. We don't want to elaborate about him, but we should read about him. And then he is followed by Herzl, and he has already gone through this process. He wanted to be implemented, to be incorporated and integrated into the society. And when he covers the trial in France and following what happened there in Vienna, where they had an anti-Semitic mayor, again, I can't go into this too much because of what Amos has told me, how long I have to speak. But then Herzl comes and he starts off the ideas that began with Achad Ha'am, Asher Tzvi Hirsch Ginsburg, and Pinsker, and he founds the first Jewish Congress. Now, Herzl creates a reality which is better known. He says that the Jews are a nation, and they can therefore all can gather around him, religious and non-religious. He declares and he creates, in fact, a mechanism for creating this situation. He, as I said, founds the Jewish Congress, which is a democratic organization. It has the executive branches and the financial system, and he says that we need to take action on the international level as well in order to do this. We demand our own country. I cannot go into the various elements of the country that he actually writes about in his books, in The Jewish State and Alt Neuland, and he creates a vision that Ben-Gurion, the Zionist movement, then embraces and fosters and completes. Ben-Gurion repeats the same principles: a democratic state, a Jewish state, in the sense, a Jewish state, and you see it in the Declaration of Independence, a Jewish state in the national sense of the word rather than the religious sense. And he definitely follows Herzl's footsteps, and he faces the difficulties of his time, which is populating the country, which is getting Jews to come in from various countries back to Israel, and of course the security that Ben-Gurion says can even make the lion's heart shiver. And so he creates a society, one for all for one, really being committed to those who serve the rest of the community. There's a consensus among the immigrants who come here, and a movement is formed very much impacted by socialist ideas. And above all, Ben-Gurion says, following Herzl's footsteps, that the state of Israel will be tested by its morality and its human values. Now, from here onwards, I would like to talk about what happened once Israel was established on the religious front. In the first few years after Israel was established, two religious denominations were very dominant: the ultra-Orthodox, or Haredi, which viewed Zionism as a secular, messianic stream that is contrary to religion, and the religious Zionism, which participated in the establishment of the state, viewed democracy and social values as a positive thing. The third denomination is the Kook denomination, and Rabbi Kook was an ultra-Orthodox Jew, but he had a very special thesis. He came and said, well, yes, the way to bring the Messiah is to use the power of the Zionists. He was very impressed by them. He came to Israel in 1904. He saw the Zionist movement. He said, these are the materials, the substances that we can build this country using. And once these materials will be put to action, then the Messiah will come, then the religion can come and prosper, and then the country, this state, will follow halachic rules, which will bring about the Messiah. This is his perception. Now, this whole thing is quite modest. So yes, during the British Mandate, Rav Kook was appointed chief rabbi. However, he was not very impactful. What happened in the 6-Day War? There was an explosion. Different people that were not fighting, they viewed this as a sign from heaven. This is the beginning of redemption. So anyone who fights knows that so many of the paratroopers brigade fell in battle, but they said, no, this is the beginning of redemption. 3 weeks before the 6-Day War began, Rav Kook's son comes along and says, it is very hard for me. Where's Jerusalem? Where's Jericho? Where's the Jordan? How can we give up on them? 3 weeks later, the 6-Day War broke out. He is viewed as a prophet, and with this prophecy begins the great strength, the great momentum, which is nationalist in part, but also very much comes from a religious point of view that comes to really do two main goals. First of all, taking over all the Israeli movements as part of the promise, not the great promise of the greater Israel, but what was promised to the tribes. And they view that as their own duty, as well as to make sure that this is going to be a religious country, that more and more people will become religious, and this country will be halacha based. So in that time, a great conflict begins between these perceptions, these views, and the regime in Israel. There are settlements, even those that are not approved. There is a Jewish underground. Mayors are being targeted. In the Islamic College, there are shots fired and so on. And what happens? And there are actual actions being taken by very, very religious denominations that view this as the beginning of redemption and want these two goals to come together. The greatest conflict begins surrounding Oslo. Oslo Accords, there is talk among the Judea and Samaria rabbis saying that there is no authority, no regime has the authority, has the mandate to give away the territories. And as these talks progress, according to ISA data, the rabbis Dov Lior, Daniel Shiloh, and Eliezer Melamed appeal and call for a conference of rabbis, and I quote, should the Prime Minister and his ministers be warned that they will be liable to Torah penalties and halachic law as those who give Jewish lives and Jewish properties to the non-Jews. Now, according to Maimonides, anyone who gives away Jewish lives and Jewish property to non-Jews, it is a duty to kill them, and whoever kills them first is best. This is Maimonides. So someone altruist, Yigal Amir, goes and kills the Prime Minister, murders them. Now this is the radical situation where there is an instruction, an order. A fundamentalist person, not everyone, but a group of fundamentalist, extreme, and very powerful rabbis are saying religion demands that we kill this prime minister if he doesn't go back on Oslo. And Yigal Amir, the assassin, indeed said that he listened to rabbis, and that is why he killed Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Now, this is a terrible conflict, and for those who feel as I do, a prime minister elected by the people. The Knesset decided what they decided twice. It's a democratic decision surrounding Oslo to go ahead with these accords. And the prime minister was also the chief of general staff during the 6-Day War. And he was also in the Harel Brigade. And so many of his warriors were killed during wars. And yet he is killed. And there is no real response because elections are about to take place, and this is being silenced. Only Yigal Amir is being tried and imprisoned. But then actually the biggest conflict between religion and state is actually not being taken care of. And to me, I know it's maybe unpopular, but it is just like killing Jesus. I compare it to killing Jesus. Now, here we are in the current days. a judicial coup is taking place, a governmental coup is taking place. It's not just a judicial reform, it's a governmental coup when immediately Ben Gvir is being appointed as the head of police. Amos, how much longer do I have? Well, I don't want to fight Amos. He's a general. We have to listen to what he says. So immediately after what happened, Ben Gvir gets the border police and the police, and just like in every revolution, what do? You take the power, you get the authority to shoot civilians. That is the only authority that is allowed to do that. And immediately everyone, the first target that is being set is to give them this power, and then they go for the next target, which is what? The judiciary system, the legal system. And they want to go into it. There are 5 rings that are really taking away the authorities of and the powers of the court to create a situation whereby the Knesset can decide what it likes. It has no oversight, no supervision. It is not controlled. And of course, this entire plan is a whole big plan, is also appointing judges and appointing new judges, taking away the powers of the court. And it's just like by the book. All the other revolutions have followed the same laws, the same rules. And in this time, we also begin the campaign against the media and taking over the public opinion, and they're selling a narrative to their audience that says democracy is a democracy, it's the rule of the majority. That's what they say. We know democracy is not just the rule of the majority, and there is no rule of the majority either anyway, because the government is actually controlling the Knesset, and the government is being controlled by a coalition, a minority. But this is what happens. Now, who is behind this entire phenomenon? The person who drafted this, or the only organization that drafted this entire play, is a party that stole the name religious Zionism, the heads of which said they want a halacha-based state, and they are on their way to one. The next stage, if they manage to do this, is, as they've said already, they're going to demand that the judges will have halachic background. They will give more and more judicial authorities to the rabbinical courts. And if you would look at the coalition agreements that were frozen a little bit, that were supposed to give more and more powers to the religious, we are well on our way to a halachic state. Now, in order to conclude, I would just like to clarify the risks that we are facing. I will not elaborate on them, but I just want to quote some people, and with that I will conclude. Zionism, as I've said, and what they wanted, they're not saying they're not nationalists, but they are saying we are going back to the all-inclusive, to the historic religionization of national aspects and halacha-based law fully and completely. Now, I just want to quote Herzl in The Jewish State, his book. Will we finally have a theocracy? No. Faith is something that we rally around, but science makes us free. Therefore, we will not allow theocratic trends of our religious people to rear their heads. We will keep them in their synagogues, just as we will have our military in the military camps. The clergy, the religious people in the army will all be very respected, but they will not run state affairs. With all due respect and appreciation toward them, they will make things difficult for us domestically and internationally, and every person must be free, says Herzl in their views. Jabotinsky was even more extreme, and he said, in the Hebrew state there will be complete freedom of conscience and religion, but also complete freedom from religion. All matters of conscience are not Jewish or moral. A Jew was born to the Jewish people or who joined the Jewish people, but you don't have to follow the mitzvot, the commandments to do so. Being a Jew and being religious is what you do with your God personally, and any zealous person, it will lead to destruction. So the government which is named after Jabotinsky, supposedly, is of course somewhere else altogether. It's much more militarist. Jabotinsky would not have allowed the ultra-Orthodox to not serve in the army, but also in other matters as well. Now, it is very important, and since I want you to hear the prophecy of Ben-Gurion anticipated, he saw that this religious risk will lead us to a great division. And he said in the Declaration of Independence, in the entire Jewish history, there has not been such unity as we had in the Declaration of the State. And this perfect unity is by nature very rare, very unique, and very great. And we of course remember that the Declaration of Independence said a Jewish state, but a Jewish state in the national sense, not in the religious sense. And it talks about the historical elements and the right of return and the democratic foundations of the Jewish state, including freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, equality without no matter what race or what gender you are, and so on. Now, this is the Declaration of Independence. It determines, in my view, the Jewish state's self-determination. And in 1944, Ben-Gurion wrote a document about the government, and he says as follows: the fundamental principle of freedom of conscience, that no person who's religious goes against, is in fact countered by a wish of the political religious parties. The fact that there is a religious political party means that they want the religious laws, the medical institutions to rule, and the freedom of conscience, the freedom of religion, does not align with the freedoms that the religion dictates. And he continues to say that the Jewish religion is a problem because, unlike Christianity, there are commandments what you must do and what you mustn't do from the moment you are born until you die, and it leaves no neutral ground outside the affinity to religion. And he says that this status of religion in the state may lead to explosive situations. Everyone will want us to be like them, and it will become an inquisition. It will be a dictatorship. Israel is a democratic state, and it will not be able to exist if it is not democratic and founded on the free choice and will of its elected officials. And to conclude, I just want to refer you to what was said by the chief rabbi, the late chief rabbi of Britain, one of the most greatest intellectuals, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, of blessed memory, who said that in the modern world there will be greater proliferation of religion because of all the revolutions, such as the French Revolution, has created freedom and liberty of man and has referred people to religion. But at the same time, he says, that dispersing more religion will give meaning to our lives in the modern world, but we must distinguish between power and religion. And he says, and I quote, thank you very much.